be, yes, he can make the concessions, but I wonder whether after 41 years in power, he has the skill set to make those concessions that are required at this time. And he, for example, might very well think it's a black box. It's been a black box all these years, a black hole of information. And I think we're first going to see a move towards a much more violent response. You don't have a live feed there, for example, which I think was the game changer in Egypt. But overall, he's got a lot more money in his hand. He's got plenty of influence around the globe. And really, in terms of that whole African area, all the oil, not the gold, all the oil is practically in Libya.
All right, let's put some of that to Ashur Shamis. I mean, Ali Khan Sachu mentioned there, and you mentioned it earlier as well, the reports of these mercenaries and militias coming from outside to quell the protests. Is that a reflection that he knows the power of the army and he doesn't trust them to put down these protests, given that they're being asked to essentially shoot at their own people? If he gets people from outside to do the job, paid people, then this is a way for him to get around that.
Absolutely. Now, the fight in Libya is between Gaddafi's clan, Gaddafi's sons, Gaddafi's tribal acolytes, and the people of Libya. Now, it is not between Libyans and Libyans. It's not between the Libyan army and the Libyan people. There is no Libyan army. The Libyan army is in the hands of his sons, and it is a collection of groups that has no similarity to an army. And then he is merely interested in defending himself and defending his position. I agree with the last speaker that he has a lot of clout and he is playing with that. But how strong is his position to master that clout, and how is he able to master? You know, when the people are in a
well, what do you think? Is he able to master this? I mean, you mentioned the economic power he has, the leverage that he has, and many people say he does enjoy a large amount of support in some parts of the country. How much will that work in his favor?
No, this is the point. I mean, the people, when the people are in revolt, in a state of revolt, they don't care about the state of the economy and the money going here and going there. They care for their position now. Their position now is to fight Gaddafi. It has passed the point of just protesting or demanding. It is becoming a fight between them and the Gaddafi people. On the other hand, Gaddafi is not going to give up very easily. He's going to use all the power he has and all the ability he has in order to preserve his power, his situation. Unfortunately, this is done by his sons, not by members of the army. Unfortunately for him, because I think once the sons fail or don't get the agreement of the people with them, they're going to lose out.
Ian Black in London, the leverage that this regime has, particularly with the West, as far as the oil wealth and the financial deals and so on, how much of that is a factor in how the West responds to this? I mean, we have had quite a lot of criticism from Western leaders, and they've been pretty strident in that criticism. But will that be as far as it goes?
Well, I think that's a very important question. I've caught a change of tone in the last 24, 48 hours from Western governments as the scale of the violence, the state violence in Libya has become clear. And I think we have to go back and look at what's happened in recent years. Muammar Gaddafi was a pariah, essentially, internationally for many years. Libya spent years under sanctions to force the surrender. We all remember of the Lockerbie bombing suspects. Gaddafi, in his time in the 1970s, 1980s, supported terrorist groups or national liberation movements, whatever you want to call them, across the world, in the Middle East and in Europe, in Northern Ireland as well. After the war in Iraq, he gave up his WMD, his weapons of mass destruction program, and he made several very, very significant moves which seemed designed and had the effect of ensuring that his regime survived. He cleaned up his act internationally and became a welcome figure, or perhaps not welcome, but he would visit European capitals. He's been to Paris, he's been to Brussels, he's been to Rome. Tony Blair, when Prime Minister of Britain, paved the way for Gaddafi's rehabilitation by visiting Gaddafi in his tent famously. And so Libya has cleaned up its act internationally. It's a very, very lucrative target for Western investment in the energy sector, in the construction sector. We remember the row over the release of Megrahi, the convicted Lockerbie bomber, in circumstances that seem to show very clearly the importance of business and trade with Libya.
You say he's cleaned up his act, but was that just an act? And are we seeing the true colours of this regime in these protests?
The distinction I was going to make is exactly that. He's cleaned up his act internationally, but internally, domestically, Libya remains not only as repressive as ever, but with this extraordinary spate of violence, more repressive, crueler towards its own people than it's ever been seen to be before. So he bought his way to respectability internationally, and domestically, very little changed. One of his sons, Ashur, was talking about the Gaddafi sons who play such an important role in different areas of life in Libya. Saif al-Islam, who for a while was the sort of favourite to succeed his father, has been kicked back in recent times. He had reformist instincts. He was more of a liberalizer. He took under his wing some limited openings in the media and for human rights, but he's been forced to step back. Another son, Mu'tasim, is the national security advisor. Khamis, we've heard a lot of in the last few days, commanding these special forces units allegedly involved in repressing the protests in Benghazi and elsewhere. So the deal has been Gaddafi gains respectability internationally, and at home it's the same old repression, now worse than ever. So we're seeing these alarmed responses from the Western governments who accepted that deal and chose to look away or to hold their noses at what was happening internally. They clearly can't do that now.
Ali Khan Sachu, with all of this wealth that we talked about earlier, surely there's enough for the regime to provide people with a decent standard of living, which is where these grievances and these protests originated from in the beginning.
Absolutely, and I think you're completely right. I mean, you could have an average GDP, annual GDP per Libyan of about $22,000 if you spread it out evenly. But the entire regime has not been built on an optimal structure for its 6.5 million people. It's been built on an optimal structure for a Gaddafi clan and for a narrow clique of people who control